7 hours later his time.
4:30.
4:30 in the afternoon. We've just had about a half an hour, maybe longer discussion, and I'm going to let him talk about whatever he feels led to talk about. We've talked about a lot of things already. Go ahead, Aristo. It's your turn.
Thank you, Ron. Now, the first thing we agreed to for me to say is that, as you notice, there's no image. And I've been asking around about this, and apparently, from what they tell me at the cafe too, the bandwidth is restricted. Ever since a German company bought the telephone companies here, they've decided to ration bandwidth. So we have Skype available, but there's no way to record it the way things are. This Zoom thing eats a lot more bandwidth. I can see Ron's image in the incoming, but he cannot see my image. So I need to either find a time when there's low internet traffic, or on a day when they ration a lot of bandwidth, and that's all. Because if I do it on the weekend or maybe on Sunday, I know they cut the bandwidth all day. Other days, I would have to come not earlier because people use internet at work and stuff, but somewhere in lunchtime, some specific little time window, which is very difficult for me to do. But I'll still try to work around that. Until now, as far as I'm concerned, I know some people say that watching my face and my mannerisms and all of that is, helpful. But there's so many radio programs on the internet. I think people are used to that. So let's consider this another radio type program. I will try to keep my voice clear, and I hope the delivery is succinct. And if that's the case, then just thank you for listening, those who are here, and we'll see where this conversation, or at least my soapbox stance here, is going to take us. Now, when I first came on today, and even the days prior, I was like a total blank. As Ron said, maybe it's the holidays, maybe it's the chemtrails that definitely create symptoms that are undeniable. If you go ask around, how do you feel the days that you have chemtrails falling from the sky, there is a symptomology that's more or less, people admit to it. Most of this is viral. These really mild viruses that make you feel dizzy, and you really can't put two thoughts together. And all of this coincides with political situations. Basically, they want to put in Greece, they want to put the next government in, but they want to guarantee that, the people capitulate to what this says. And that's in a general form. That's what I've been saying all along. For some reason, they care what we think, and they try to convey that they don't care what we think. They try to convey that we're powerless, because we see power in terms of how the Matrix defines it, which is our common sense. And so, but it is common sense. Well, let me ask you this. If you're hypnotized and brainwashed, do you know you're brainwashed and hypnotized? Are you sure anything you say has not been planted into your head? How do you know who you are even? These are issues that freak us out, and in a way they should, because it's almost like your identity has been raped and stolen. Yeah. So we talk about straw men and names and numbers and this and that. It's like, but we don't really know who or what we are. And then, and usually we latch on to whatever somebody else says. Now, how can somebody else tell you who and what you are? Whether it's a Bible or authority or the pinnacle or whatever, how can they tell you? It's almost like somebody coming in and running your family. Oh, wait a minute. Isn't that what the government is doing? Telling you how to raise your children, telling you what they should think, telling you what you should think, telling you what you can say, what you cannot say. And then you cry about your rights as if saying, but these are rights, capital R, these letters, R-I-G-H-T, whatever, so you have to obey them. And they'll say, hey, man, I'm a psychopath, but I'm not going to admit it. Of course they're not going to admit it, because then you'd start thinking differently, and that's what they don't want. But because by the time they admit it, they're going to be sure that your submission is complete. This is why things have become known, why people are waking up. We think that people are waking up because they've gotten wise to these people and it can't be hidden. That's half the truth. I agree, but that's half. The other half of the truth is you cannot keep this hidden if you're going to do the end game. It's going to have to come to the surface. One day, the person who wants to shoot you is going to have to pull out their gun if they're going to shoot you point blank like they want to, because it's not enough for them to enslave us like the past. They want to start a new historic cycle. They don't have the benefit of being in the middle of an old historic cycle where the pattern is already ingrained through some form of collective trauma, like Atlantis, archetypally speaking, or maybe literally speaking, some form of given where everything you do seems to be turned against you, as if there's a master program that plays the role of God, an artificial intelligence, or because I don't believe this is a natural intelligence unless you start saying that God has a shadow, which may be true. Because if we have a shadow, maybe God has a shadow, and maybe God is trying to deal with the shadow. And if it's not easy for us, would it be easy for God? Because the shadow is linked, just as the light is linked, just like truth is linked, just like we're an expression of divinity and made in the image and likeness. So perhaps the shadow of humanity, the shadow of psychopathy, is made in the image and likeness of the divine shadow. And you say there is no divine. No, there is no divine shadow when God is one, up in the void, is a singularity, but the shadow is not part of the experience. When you make manifestation, however, you need a shadow play and a light play. That's what some people say. That's what energy is. Energy is a light play. But how can you play with light if there is no shadow? So there's no way, and that's what I was saying in the last video. There is no way there can be manifestation without shadow and light. The only difference is that when you walk in the street, you look at the trees on a sunny day and they have a shadow, the shadow doesn't stand up and try to kill you. The shadow is meant to be a part of the tree. It's a part of the way the light shines on it and all of that. It's part of the light. It's been, though if light is love, then shadow is love too. And the shadow is simply what creates apparent separation. That's its role. It's meant to be what makes you know that you're you and me, and that we're not the same. However, we're still linked. Without the shadow, we would be where many New Agers want us to be, and many spiritualists. One, no distinction.
Nothingness.
Nothingness. Yeah, basically nothing else but
no
me.
Creation, no nothing.
No creation, no nothing. Just one essence. And it's like, what is the point, of that? That's the most ridiculous argument I have ever heard, but that's fine. Whoever wants to go back, the funny thing is, you're not going to go back because you have a shadow.
You can't. Even if you want to, you can't.
You cannot. And that's what they see. Many mystics promoted the integration of the shadow to leave. They didn't do it to heal the earth. They said, well, first we have to integrate the shadow, and then we can demanifest. And that is right. You can. But when you do that, you won't want to if you truly integrate the shadow. So there were little inklings of denial in their processes. I'm not saying they were in denial or they were fooling themselves completely, but we're talking of a relative issue that goes straight to the divine level, where even God has no experience of the shadow. God is beyond time. So you can't say that prior to this and after that. But from the moment the Bible says, in the beginning, there is a beginning. Time is created. That means that the beginning is a reference point, and there was a before that. Before that, God had no experience of the shadow. After that, you had heaven and earth, the firmament, the void, the waters, all of these things, the medium of creation. My point is that, again, we're talking about a transmutation of manifestation, a completion of it, that is a confluence of many, 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 many cycles. So saying it's not easy is an understatement. This is not 1776. This is not the revolution of your grandfathers. This is not even anything that any Bible has ever addressed. This is way beyond that, to the point that Christianity could not compute it. So they came up with an apocalypse. Apocalypse means revelation. So no matter what God tried to tell a human being somewhere who tried to write something down, that human being could not sustain it 2,000 years ago. So we have to understand that we are here up to a grand ass challenge. And this grand ass challenge means that if we are here for it, we are very, very special. And of course, we feel like crap because if you put the champion of some country in, this is a champion athlete in a certain sport, let's say, and you put them from their local leagues where they're the champion, the big kahuna, you put them in an international league where everybody's an Olympic star. They're going to feel like crap because there's going to be others equivalent. So this playing field is far more challenging. This is the playing field that's even challenging for gods. And I believe that God, singular, goddess, and whatever, have reached a point, but they haven't integrated this playing field completely into their experience, so they seem distant. My point is that everybody's on this playing field. You go to a level where things seem that you're powerless. Consider that, yes, that's what my five senses are telling me. But also consider that the matrix controls the five senses to a very big degree. And that the matrix is hypnotism. It's brainwashing. It's not a physical or even a real experience. Hypnotism is an experience, isn't it? Being brainwashed is an experience. You're basically being programmed as awesome, but it doesn't mean it's who you are. It's something done to you. So how can we undo this? If we can undo this at a local level in our own being, and if that is what the priority requires of us, if that is all we can do, then that means the earth is not going to explode and the big dictatorship is not going to come into place, until we do what we need to do individually. I believe that as long as there's one individual who's determined to do this, then nothing is going to fall apart, because as far as I know of history, there was never such a thing. I've researched and researched and researched, and I have never found transformation options. I've had to modify everything as far as I see things. The old traditions place a good foundation, but they've all been lacking because they've been adapted to something that doesn't apply to this level of transformation necessity. But does that mean we all have to be spiritual or whatever? No. It means what some people have been saying, that this is inherent in our being. They say our DNA is changing. If that happens, that's a lot of stress, especially when somebody's raping you in the process. So if our DNA is changing and everything, there's only one certainty: uncertainty. That's the only thing we can be certain of. And it's like, people, please, get used to that. If it's something that terrifies you and you have to kill yourself, I can't help. I don't know anybody who can. But if you really think about things, the world may seem to be going into hell in a handbasket, but it's not certain. And it's not even highly probable, if you really look at things more deeply, how the so-called cabal is spinning its wheels, how the so-called family is spinning its wheels, how people are avoiding facing things constantly. Everything seems to be spinning its wheels because everything relied on givens. Even the psychopaths relied on givens. From the very beginning, the given of the shadow. From the moment benign sages believed that paradise can only be maintained through some form of control, however good. You have children. You raise your children. But one day your children leave. What if you don't want them to leave? What if you want them to stay home and work the fields for you and keep doing jobs for you? As a loving parent, there have been cases of possessive parents that have not allowed their children to marry, to go and have families, or even if they did have families, to keep them in the home under the pretext of extended family, but they were iron controlling them and brainwashing them for whatever reason. Is that freedom? What happens? Resentment builds up. Resentment is the shadow. Resentment is how the shadow comes up. And it builds like a dark cloud, and eventually it becomes a certainty. The certainty that the light has denied the shadow. That is the certainty. And that upon that certainty, evil has built. That's why evil seems certain and strong, because the one thing that's certain is that the shadow is denied. When the shadow becomes accepted, Oh, is everything going to be fixed? No. Then all of those people who are supported by the certainty that the shadow has been um, is the first victim of violation. So we call all cry victimhood, but the first victim of violation, even though they turn into crazies and are raping and pillaging and whatever, are the psychopaths, or the essence of the psychopaths, or the gods behind the psychopaths. And who violated them? Maybe it was a god in creation, or maybe it was God who didn't know how to deal with the shadow because there was no precedence. And oh, we have problems with that because we can't understand that maybe God is evolving. Because how do you go from singularity to multiplicity? Was there some kind of manual? Is that omniscience without experience? Theory? Theory is a human construct. How can God, which is one with no differentiation, enter differentiation without what we may call trial and error, without actually trying to force the bliss of unity onto a situation where shadow play requires a whole different dynamic for love? Same love, but a different dynamic of expression. This is not easy to digest, and it's even harder to apply it to material reality, to your practical experience. That's why a lot of times it's maybe better to throw out the new age stuff, old age stuff, spiritual stuff, religion, and just say this: look, everything has always been uncertain. God, the only certainty that God ever had was his own nature. And his own nature was her own nature was unity. And out of that unity, divinity sprang into but what is uncertainty? Uncertainty is the other side of infinite possibility. Because if it's uncertain that this is true, if it's uncertain that that's true, what defines truth? You define truth, but not arbitrarily and not through some kind of program. You define truth by what you sense yourself to be, by who yourself you sense yourself to be, by your inherent meaning. What is your sense of meaningfulness? What is meaningful to you? Without having to extend it into some elaborate system. Well, it's meaningful for me, for everybody to have a job and work. No, nobody wants to work. That really isn't meaningful. We're promoting civilization so we can actually have a more meaningful and enjoyable time in manifestation. So things can be better. We're not doing it so we can work more efficiently. That's something a slave master tells us. That's a program, in my opinion. Why is it a program? Because nobody in their right mind wants to follow that path unless it's been ingrained or unless they're afraid of something. They're afraid because when you look at uncertainty, all you see is the bad outcomes. Why? Well, because so far, the only certainty within uncertainty was the shadow, the bad outcomes. Now, how do we embrace the shadow? You know, there are some ways to do that, some approaches, but basically the first thing everybody that is useful for everybody to do, in my honest opinion, is to be able to take stock of themselves, to say, look, man, the only certainty is uncertainty as far as givens are concerned. But then there's another certainty, me. Who am I? Now, the shadow, the psychopaths, they want to wipe that out. They want to wipe out my certainty of self. They want to make me uncertain of who I am, what I am, and my potential. And that's the arena, in my opinion. If we can make progress in that arena, we will see parallel, detailed, minor successes in other arenas at first. But these can accumulate if we latch onto them, if we build upon them. The certainty that we create is the certainty of ourselves first. Because the only ones who are motivated that we do not have that certainty is the shadow that is now afraid to come back to the light. Because the light has not shown indications that it's going to accept it, except for sitting on a soapbox like yours truly here and spouting, whatever ideals come out of my mouth, so to speak. But they are still ideals of the heart. They're not practices, though. They're simply food for thought. And that's the thing, there are people who are claiming authority because they find that when they do so, people listen. I don't care about that. The fact is, listening is dependent on you. You can listen, and the thing is, if you do listen, you don't have to deny anything else. But you may have to make a choice, and many, many choices, always. Do your choices serve you, or do they serve somebody else? Is your conclusion of reality, if you want to really figure what's reality, ask yourself, whom does it serve? Whom does my conclusion serve? Does it really serve me to give up? Or does it serve me to say I refuse to do something unless everything else changes? Does it serve me to be a martyr? Does it serve me to go out in the streets and do this and that and the other? So all of these questions basically are where we take stock of ourselves. We take stock of our resources. We have so many material resources, they're dwindling, blah, blah, blah. What about our internal resources? Some people have been meditating for years, like yours truly. Where has that taken us? Where has that brought us? Some people say nowhere. Well, let me put it this way. If you practice mindfulness, that's not meditation. That's what people are promoting. That's a preliminary. That's a preliminary that you're supposed to progress into another preliminary and then move into meditation proper, which is very, very difficult to do unless you have mastered the preliminaries. Mindfulness is like a warm-up exercises before you engage in a sport. It's helpful and it's good and it can give you peace, but it's not meditation. It doesn't connect you to divine awareness, so to speak, in terms of enlightenment and all of that. These preliminaries have all been described in certain texts. These texts are mostly translated wrongly in English, and they are interpreted wrongly even in their original language because priests have, taken upon themselves as roles of philosophers to interpret them. They say, okay, you have to be nice to people, you can't have sex, you have to give away all your possessions, and then you have to go somewhere under a designated teacher of the system who's wearing the right robes and has been approved. And then you have to do these practices that are renouncing yourself. And then you will become enlightened. That's not the way it goes. But what I'm saying is a radical thought, because way back when, the true mystics were all revolutionaries. And even in the meantime, 2,000 years ago, Jesus was a revolutionary and he got killed. So when you try to conform your viewpoints and make them nice and acceptable, you got to understand that anything that is connected to liberation is connected to revolution. And you have to define what revolution means to you. I mean, violent, non-violent, yeah. If it's going to be non-violent in terms of physical violation, it still has to be radical enough to challenge you. It's not going to be easy. Walking, marching in the street, just makes you a target, in my honest opinion. I mean, they keep mentioning Gandhi, and I've said again and again, look, the British had decided to liberate India already, as well as all their other colonies in order to create third world corporate conglomerates. As soon as Gandhi really went against them by trying to unite the Muslims and the Hindus with Pakistan, because the Indian territories included Pakistan and Kashmir, they killed him, So, and then they use them as an example to say, okay, people, keep marching. You guys are easy targets. We just go and billy club you, and that's it. And then you'll just go and keep being billy clubbed. So what do? I'll figure it out. There's a lot of smart people out there. They just need to think outside of their dare to enter uncertainty, because uncertainty is the realm of infinite possibility. It means that if there's a solution, first you have to emotionally engage with uncertainty. That's how the mind works. That's how the brain comes up with solutions to problems. What is a problem? A problem is an uncertain situation. It's a necessity that has no certainty about it. I want to do A, but how? I don't know. Where? What? That's uncertainty. So a lot of people, what they do is rack their brains, and then they sleep on it. Sleeping on it, or basically forgetting about the problem, is basically entering into uncertainty, because it's like, yeah, okay, the problem can be solved or not. I don't know. But I'm going to open up to that feeling of not knowing and let the wheels turn to bring me to the solution. That's the whole thing. Yeah, the kid cries, are we there yet? Are we there yet? But the kid has no clue if they're ever going to get there. They don't know how far it is, or when, they trust their parents maybe that they're going to get to the destination, but they might grow old and die before they do so. as far as the kid's concerned, they feel really bad because there's nothing for the kid to do in the car. So you give the kid something to do. If the car is big enough that the kid can actually engage, the kid can learn to meditate, the kid can learn to play a board game, the kid can finally turn to their siblings and resolve their problems with them, you know. But kids usually don't do that because they need space to run free, you know. But look at the car. This car is just not full of babies. The little infant has no problem in the little crib, in the little, you know, place they put the infants. They don't care. They want to be restricted. It's good to have a benign parent over a little baby. And maybe it's good for a benign parent that allows a child to run free in a fenced area, and that's good. But what happens when the kid turns into a teenager? You got to extend the bounds, and the teenager is going to get into trouble, isn't he or she? You know, sometimes big trouble. And you can't avoid that because if you try to shelter the teenager too much, you clip their wings. You know, are we going to clip our wings for the sake of some kind of security? And then what? Then that's what happened in Atlantis, let's say. Somebody decided that teenage humanity, because when humanity rises to the point of having global civilization or civilization, then they are not children anymore in a garden. They are not adults either. They are teenagers. Teenagers, adolescence is the most dangerous part of life. Anybody who's a parent knows that, you know. I mean, well, one to me, you know, when kids turn into, and especially early adolescence, you know, and the kids are going to get hurt. It's always happened to some way. The parent is going to be there to help them heal. But sometimes they're going to go so far astray that the parent may not be able to reach them. Sometimes they're going to be prodigal children. I bet the prodigal guy in the Bible left his house when he was a teenager. He just got pissed off. And then when he finally grew up and went through the school of hard knocks, so to speak, then he went home. But he didn't go home to submit to the patriarch. Or maybe he did in the Bible, but in reality, he went home to engage in the resources of what, you know, was his property, and to be able to move them. Maybe he made business deals with people in other countries and whatever. The point is that we don't need a benign dictatorship in order to proliferate. But before we do that, we need to act as adults and not as adolescents. Right now, we don't know the difference. The adolescent is still dealing with the shadow. In fact, the adolescent is the child is the one who's protected by the shadow. God protects us from the shadow when we're infants and allows us to stretch our wings a little bit when we're children. But by the time we reach adolescence, we need to be kicked out of the garden, so to speak, in order to engage with the shadow, because that's the only time, the only way we can mark our own territory of free will. And sometimes that's very, very hard. Now, things have gotten crazy because the children have all freaked out, gone insane. But the point is that, you know, let's say you're God and you want to make manifestation and you know what's going to happen. You know that, well, okay, I have no clue how to do this, but it's obvious that if it's done, these are the probabilities, all of these mistakes that can be made, all of these trial and error zones. It's going to be incomplete because at one point my creation is going to wake up to itself and realize it's incomplete. It's like waking up on the operating table. Can you imagine that? And then trying to put your guts in by yourself. Okay, the doctor says, now you finish up. You can sew up the wound. You know, here's the needle and thread. You know, and you're completely freaked out, of course. But somehow the analogy stops there because we have more resources than that. And somehow we are engaging in realizing what they are. They're not whatever has been promoted. Being able to lift up rocks, being able to stop bullets and all of that. Things go much deeper than that, in my honest opinion. But everything, and still, it's all within us in some way. The first thing is defining who you are, defining what you are. You know, are you an infant? Are you a child? Are you an adolescent? We're certainly not adults, or else we would have been in that light at the end of the tunnel. But how does an adolescent become an adult? They go through a test of manhood or womanhood, or, you know, some kind of trial, some kind of situation where they apply all of their experience and all of their determination, like the prince in the hero's journey, or the princess. No. This is a kind of hero's journey, But then look at all the suffering. How can you even call it that? Well, yeah, I mean, it's sugar-coated for the fairy tales, but if you really know where the fairy tales are based on, it's really nasty. And the point is that, again, you see the dangers, but uncertainty tells you, look, 50-50 doesn't mean you're screwed. And it's not random either, because you are a free will person. You make decisions. You are not being pushed by fate as the shepherds want you to think. And the collective has conditioned us, not the collective, but the psychopaths have conditioned us into being sheep. Look at our religion. Who is the shepherd? And I told Ron that many people believe that this shepherd idea comes from ancient Egypt, and where the Pharaoh was God, and that the shepherd basically is one who has awakened their spinal path, and the way it curves around the skull, and then it comes out like a little serpent at the third eye level that the pharaohs had, the Uraeus, the serpent of enlightenment, to be a ruler, but the shape was like a shepherd's crook. And so all of these people have created this thing that was similar to the Oriental mandate of heaven. God is telling us what to do. You guys don't hear God, don't you? Oh, no, we don't. We don't hear anything. Well, I do. So I'm going to tell you what he says. And so what's happened? Something has inhibited our ability to listen, our ability to connect. And it's not up there and it's not down there. It's in here. And I know we've been saying that, and it's not working, it's not working. Well, let's take stock of the situation and take advantage of uncertainty. And I'm talking the feeling, being able to sit there and freak out, and it's okay to freak out. And I'm very glad that Ron here does his videos. And I'm not saying he's freaking out either, but expressing.
I'm freaking out sometimes.
Well, people take that in a negative context, and I just want to say that freaking out is a natural response. Sometimes a teenager needs to throw a tantrum, or even just scream, or even just complain and bitch about his parents. It's not fair. It's not fair. But all of this basically strengthens, because in the end you sit there and eventually you experience a confluence of forces that you can absorb. You can open up, acclimate to the feeling of uncertainty when you know that uncertainty is like balancing on the razor's edge. We've talked about the razor's edge, paradox and all that. I mean, why isn't the razor's edge a highway where I could sleep and pitch my tent and build a house? I'm sorry, it's the razor's edge because this is a transition. It's unscripted. And even to the extent that you don't know when it's going to end or how long it's going to last. So all conclusions are uncertain. And we say that, that was a hard lesson for me to learn, going on the internet and saying things that for me were inspired by divinity. And people said, you can't prove that. How do you know? It's like, well, look, man, this is my conviction. No, it's just your opinion. And it's the thing, well, okay, it's my view. I don't like the word opinion because it's too arbitrary. Opinion is whatever, you wake up in the morning and whatever's in your head, that's my opinion. But when it's a conviction, when my heart blazes with it, when I feel it's downloaded from, higher awareness, when it's really the depth of meaning for me, well, it's my view, but it's not just an opinion. And I stand by it, and it's a source of strength for me. So I can't push it on anyone, but I find it valuable to convey and attempt to communicate in as clear a way as possible. Now, I don't know how much of this discussion has made sense. I don't even remember how long we were talking, but a little more than half an hour, I guess. So yep. I guess I'm going to conclude it right here. I hope this made sense for you, and I hope you could, the lack of picture doesn't detract from people listening. So thank you once again. And
Aristo, I think I'm going to use the title, Does God Have a Shadow?
That was my original intent. I was going to say dealing with God's shadow.
Yeah. And so I thought that's what came out to me. I wrote that down fairly early on, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, it's a good one.
All right. Well, thank you again. And as always, food for thought. And yes, I throw tantrums. I am in a place where I'm really angry at the way the world is going. And I'm not going to apologize for that. I think it's a lot of shit happening. Yeah. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it or try to pretend it's not there. I'm going to deal with it to the best of my ability. And one thing that I might have learned is that I have no clue what meditation is, because what I do is I observe my thoughts. It's mindfulness,
Yes.
not mindlessness.
Yes.
And so if mindlessness defines meditation,
No, it doesn't.
I don't know how to do meditation.
It doesn't define it. It's very difficult to define because it doesn't fit into the categories of what we do. But mindfulness is a precursor.
Okay, well, that's where I think I am most of the time in what I call meditation.
But we can do one thing. We did talk about all these things, and I elaborated. But I think that I can at some point talk about that a little bit. There's just so many critical issues involved. It's hard to get into those topics again. But if I can express it in a way, I may be able to, clear up the misunderstandings about it.
Well, I know I listened to Bill Donohue's latest sermon on Double or Nothing, or Matthew Double or Nothing, or something like that, where he talks about the gift of the talents and stuff like that. And I had to listen twice because I felt like it was saying something to me, but I also realized after listening to it that I still don't get it.
You'll have to send me the link to that one if you haven't posted it.
I don't think I posted it. It's just something I like Bill Donohue. I met the guy once. He doesn't remember, and he's never acknowledged me on anything that I've sent to him. But he certainly thinks outside the box, and he's one of those preachers. He's actually a Bible preacher.
Oh yeah.
Discusses the Bible in a way that's unlike anybody else that I've ever heard discuss it.
Oh yeah.
Except for Bruce Morgan, my mentor.
Yeah. No, I like him. That's why I was like, well, send the link. That sounds really interesting to see.
Yeah. All right. Thank you again, Aristo. Sorry I dragged it on for a few extra minutes, but
no, I have not. This is my time here too, so it's hard for me to get here earlier than the time I do get.
Well, maybe we can work something out where we can get it at a bandwidth time where we can have a video again, or I can get another program that is capable of a decent recording.
Yeah, I can explore. I mean, but there's no. It all varies, so I can't predict a certain.
All right. Well, thank you much.
And thank you too, Ryan. And thank you, listeners. Namaste.